Welcome to a Celtic State of Mind. We're back with the Axon Bulletin. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I'm joined by Colin Watt. Welcome back to the show, Colin.
Thanks for having us back, Paul.
Always plenty to talk about. Please get involved on Facebook, YouTube, and also on Twitter. Get the comments and the questions through, and Colin and I will try and work through as many of them as possible. Plenty of talking points, Colin. We'll be talking about Shane Duffy. Is he coming on a permanent deal? We'll be chatting about the test event, Celtic versus Motherwell. But who's going to get in? They reckon that 1,000 fans is going to get in. We look forward to the Dundee United game tomorrow. Henrik Larsson's away to Barca, should he come back to Celtic. And we'll be looking also at some of our signing targets according to press reports. So first and foremost, we will have a wee look at the test events. It's going to be a controversial test, I would suggest, because there's 52,000 season ticket holders.
I think it's up to 55
55. Who gets in? That's a big question. How are they going to work this out, Colin?
I think this is a difficult situation. I mean, when you look at the numbers, we're talking 1,000. Now, that'll be 1,000 fans. Obviously, there will be still the coaching staff, the ground staff and all that on top of that. So there'll be more than 1,000 people in the stadium. But what we're saying here is we're opening the doors for 1,000 fans to get in. It wouldn't be dismissive to say that those that pay thousands of pounds a season to sit in the hospitality sections shouldn't be first in line to get in. I'm not saying that they should, but those people would have the right to feel as though they've contributed that money, they should be ahead of the list. They're not to say that they're any better than any other Celtic fans, but I can see that maybe being the way that Celtic approach this.
Potentially, and I think we have spoken to, over the last couple of weeks, to some people who have hospitality packages, and that's how they watch the game, and their feeling was that they should be asked first. So there's always going to be this debate, Colin, and it does open that up. It's great that we're moving forward and there is progress in relation to getting football fans back into the stadiums.
Definitely,
first and foremost, that's brilliant. Celtic have been at the forefront. You know, this is something that Neil Lennon mentioned in the post-Bolingoli saga, that Celtic had been in the forefront of assisting the relevant authorities in getting people back to the football. That's something that Celtic wanted to assist with, for obvious reasons. And it's great that we're at the forefront again. 1,000 fans is going to be difficult. Let's have a look at some of the comments coming in via YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. If you're on YouTube, we're 5 followers away from hitting our first target, which is 1,000. So please subscribe to us. Free charge, and you get your daily content. So let's have a wee look at some of the comments, Colin, coming through. First up is Ryan Byrne, who's commenting via YouTube. Thanks for joining us, Ryan. Welcome to the Axon Bulletin. And he's suggesting key workers first, perhaps. I quite like that.
That's not a bad idea. I like that. Obviously, there's been incredible work done by our key workers right across Scotland and across the UK, across this whole pandemic period. And to be fair, they've been treated incredibly well by a lot of organisations, offering them discounts and offering them things like that. I think that was what the idea was when we played in the tournament over in Lyon, was that the people that were allowed into the stadium were key workers or family of key workers. So again, that would be a good initiative. It might get a couple of people within the government back on side after the Bolingoli saga, so I wouldn't be against that.
It's an interesting point you make, Colin. It might be, it's the right thing to do, first and foremost, but it might be a political thing as well, like you say, because obviously there's been a lot of bad press around the Bolingoli situation. Let's have a look at Glasgow Rebel. Welcome back to the show, Glasgow Rebel. It's always great to hear from you, and you're commenting via YouTube. Good afternoon, lads. Has to be season ticket holders. They paid their money up front. And then, as you said before, I think we're pushed up to about 55,000.
Roughly,
we're going for 10 in a row. Every season ticket holder will want to be one of the thousands. You know, that is why this is going to be a difficult situation for all involved.
Definitely. I mean, if there was an opportunity for any fan to get in, and it was first come, first served, there'd be people queuing outside Celtic Park now, getting their tents in as if it was trying to get tickets for centre court at Wimbledon.
We used to do that every time a new Oasis single came out, Colin, back in the day.
Yeah.
Camping out for tickets, camping out for a single. That used to happen back in the 90s.
You realise you've just admitted this to everyone on YouTube?
Hey, there's people out there who'll be part of that. That's what we used to do. It's only, queuing up outside our price. Now, Gary Doonan, again, welcome back, Gary. You're commenting via Facebook. It's a difficult one. Wouldn't like to make that decision. I'm the same. I just think it's impossible. You can't please all the people. All fans count, from the corporate types right down to the concessions. Difficult decisions ahead.
And the thing is as well, you're kind of left with a situation where you might have a family of 3 or 4 season ticket holders, and only one gets the chance to go. Now, it's easier when you're looking at the away games, when you go to Ibrox or you go to Pittodrie, where potentially you have only got 1,000 tickets. That goes on people's records. But when it comes to a home game and you've limited attendance, it is going to be very, very hard. And I guarantee that no matter what decision Celtic make, someone out there will find a way to say it was the wrong idea.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I'm not in the position. If I get the chance to be one of the 1,000, I will be there. And I'm sure there's many, many more like me out there. But at the same time, there's probably still some people sitting at home saying it's maybe still too early for them.
Well, Colin, what we're going to try and do today is the bulletin, and the bulletin's strength is all about engaging with people who watch and listen to A Celtic State of Mind. We're going to try and get through as many comments as possible, because it is growing by the show, and it's always sad for me to switch off when there's loads of people commenting. So we're going to try and get through as many as possible, but there's a lot of topics to cover as well, which will probably result in this being an extended bulletin, but that's fine because there's plenty to talk about.
We're here all day.
We're here all day. Now, you may notice that along the top of your screen, we have a bulletin sponsor who also sponsored the match day during the week. That's JBM's. All their contact details are at the top and bottom of your page. If you have your own business, company, fanzine, pin badge company, anything that you want to promote to A Celtic State of Mind's audience, get in touch, because we have quite a few different opportunities available, and we are now going out to tens of thousands on a daily basis. So
incredible figures.
Get involved. Now, Kevin Graham, people may recognise Kevin's name and Kevin's poetry on A Celtic State of Mind, and the podcasting poet is saying that corporate and sponsors, money talks. How cynical are you, Kevin?
I mean, he's right though. He is right. At the end of the day, Celtic are going to run as a business, and if they see it as a way to please the people that are paying the most amount of money, you wouldn't be surprised if the Celtic board make that decision. But as someone else pointed out earlier, every fan's as good as the rest. So it is a really difficult decision. We are going to upset
how many
thousands of Celtic fans.
Oh, of course. How many members does the Kano have now? Over 500?
Over 500. I think I was reading about the Kano the other day. They've got something like 189 season tickets or something like that.
Right.
And they were given 189 codes for Celtic TV. How that works and how they distribute that, I don't know. But, I mean, again, that's a good example as well. Bringing in the Kano wouldn't be a bad idea. Getting the kids in, they say that the kids is where the virus is spread less, so maybe a safer option.
They'll also be looking at this bubble that they keep going on about, there might be a bubble of a dozen people or 20 people, and they might have to look at that. I don't know how they're going to work it out. But as we keep saying, it's a great development and it's progress as well. And let's look through some more of the comments that are coming in through Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. Just a reminder, on YouTube, subscribe free of charge. We're looking to top 1,000 subscribers by the end of the bulletin. I think we're about 5 short, Colin.
995, so please like and subscribe, tell your friends, and get involved in A State of Mind. Also, if you're commenting on Twitter, if you're commenting under the post, we won't be able to see it, so please get involved through Periscope, through our Facebook group, or comment on our YouTube live chat.
And Cairns Celtic has done just that via Periscope, and he suggests that they should be asked first because they have more money than some folk. Are we talking hospitality there, perhaps, the corporate?
I think that's where he's going with that, and this is a discussion we've now had several times. It's money. It comes down to money. Celtic are a business. Do you know what? Whether you invest £30,000 a season in Celtic or you invest your £500 season ticket, you've put your money, no matter how much you've put in, you've put it into the club. So
yeah,
there'll not be a right or wrong way to do this. There'll be the way that Celtic decides to do it.
I think everybody will take that on the chin, Colin. If you don't get to be one of the 1,000, you just got to accept it. And there will be a fair way of doing it. The fair way of doing it may well be that they look at, for example, a group of people who they can get in to the stadium, let's say corporate, right? But do they live in the same wee bubble, the kind of bubble of, a household, for example, or 3 household? Probably not.
What you've got to remember as well is this is a test event. We're hoping to run a couple of these test events before September 14th, when the government will announce what percentage of stadium we're allowed to open to. So it could be that we're available to open up to 30% once the government announces it. But for these test events, all we need is for them to go well, because the more of these events that goes well, the better in our favour it stands, and the quicker we'll get back to normality at Celtic Park, and we'll be able to go and get our pie, our Bovril and our Paradise Windfall ticket.
Very good. East End Boy 8 is also commenting via Twitter, just do a random ballot, fairest way for me. What do you think of that? There's going to be people pulled out of that ballot who need to go to the game with someone, for example, kids. So there's always going to be issues regardless of how you do it, isn't there?
It's a bit like the home cup ticket scheme when you do a ballot for the semi-final. There's always going to be people that miss out. But as I said, there's still people at the minute that are in a shielding category that have chosen now, even though shielding is over, for them to still stay at home, not to go out. People are still very scared of catching this virus, and it's completely understandable. So what happens if you draw out 100 fans like that and they don't want to go to the game?
I know.
There isn't an easy way of doing this, but I'm loving all the suggestions that come in, because what we're seeing from the fans here will be what is going round that Celtic boardroom right now. And when they get the approval from it, there'll be 7 or 8 different ideas that they're going to have to pick one from.
And maybe they'll even listen into this podcast so that they can get a wee bit of an idea about how people are thinking about the methods. Gary Weir via Facebook, welcome back to the show, Gary. It's good to have you involved. And he's suggesting, so the more affluent amongst their support get preferable treatment. That's nonsense. And again, that would be a method, Colin, that is very specific rather than random. So it might be deemed as being unfair. Oh,
definitely. And as I said to you, I don't think there is a way out there that's going to suit everyone, that's going to be fair to everyone. Someone's definitely going to find a way to complain or moan about it. But when you kind of step back from it and you look at how Celtic kind of do their business, then it wouldn't surprise you if that's the route that they went down.
We shall see. We shall see over the next couple of weeks.
Definitely.
East End Boy 8, welcome back. Just have a small selection of tickets for key workers, the rest for season ticket holders. So he reckons you can get a cross-section of different parties involved. Jason Christie, welcome to the show again. It's always good to have you involved. And we've also got... this is going back to you criticising me for waiting outside our price. East End Boy 8 waited outside John Menzies for Be Here Now. And by the way, I remember the people were actually being filmed outside the shops when Be Here Now came out. When was that? 1997?
97.
Today.
Yeah.
It was today. This is the anniversary, Be Here Now. Yes.
Was you going to give us a rendition?
33 years. No, 33 years ago. So
33 years ago?
I think it's, is it 33? Do the maths.
23.
Aye. I'm getting old. So it's one of the albums I think it's improved with age, Colin.
It's an album I've certainly listened to. As I said, I'm not a massive Oasis fan, but it's one of those albums that even non-Oasis fans will have sat and listened to because it is so iconic. And the tracks that have came off that album still now are relevant within the music space. You go into pubs across Scotland and you'll hear an Oasis song played. And it generally comes off of Be Here Now. So it is one of those albums. I know in America what they do with sort of classic films or classic albums is they keep them in a museum for restoration for people 50, 60 years from now to say in the 90s this was what was big. And if we were doing that here in the UK, I definitely think that would be one of the albums we'd look at.
I always remember the front cover with the Rolls Royce in the pool, and I likened that to Brendan Rodgers' Celtic career in the third season because that was the third album, so I'll stick by that. Now, Craig Graham, welcome to a Celtic State of Mind's Bulletin. You're commenting via YouTube. Remember to subscribe on YouTube. It's free of charge, and we're looking to get above 1,000 by the time Colin and I check it after this bulletin. Afternoon, guys. Really enjoying the show. I agree with Ryan. Should definitely be key workers in first. Would anyone complain? I don't think so.
No, and here's another thing that we've not actually discussed. What if it's just limited to Celtic staff? The Celtic have probably got well over 1,000 staff out there between their retail division, their ticket office, all the PR team and stuff like that. It may just be that is who that they put in.
That's not a bad shout.
It's easier for track and trace purposes in that sense.
Yeah.
So it might not be any of the kind of regular fans like me or you that gets in.
I know, but I've been accused of having a AAA pass at Celtic Park. So maybe I'll
if you
get
can take a +1, I'll be there.
I think that's a good idea, Celtic staff or key workers. I don't think many people would argue if that was the way, and it would actually avoid the arguments if they went down those routes, I believe. Kevin Graham's back on, and he says NHS and supermarket and food distribution workers and teachers. As a local authority worker, I was classed as key worker, but those are more worthy than me. Well done, Kevin.
Congratulations, Kevin. I didn't know that putting hats on horses was classed as a key worker.
Well, there you go. And Half Stone Cowboy, I recognise that name. You've been
That's Kevin's pseudonym.
You've been on the show before. Luck of the draw. It could well be. Is there going to be a way of keeping everybody happy? Probably not.
No.
We'll come back to some of these comments later on, Kevin. We've got loads more to chat about. We've been talking over the last couple of weeks about Celtic's signing targets, and it would appear that we're a wee bit further down the line with Shane Duffy. What have you got to report on that?
So it's been confirmed today. Neil Lennon has openly admitted that discussions are now ongoing with Brighton for the move for Shane Duffy. Now, if you follow Celtic's transfers closely, you'll know that Neil Lennon tends not to mention a Celtic target unless it's sort of down the line as such. When he was asked about Shane Duffy after the game on Wednesday night, he says it was just one of a number of targets that Celtic had, and that there was no concrete sort of connection to him. And then today it looks as if they're looking to make that deal, and from what I understand, it's also going to be a permanent deal.
Right.
It's not going to be a loan deal.
What fee are they looking at, Colin?
Somewhere in the region of £5 million, which I think is a fantastic pickup. You look at him, he's 28, 29 years old, an Irish international. He's played nearly 100 games in the Premier League. I think it's a fantastic pickup for Celtic if that is the case. Where is that money going to come from? You were talking with Stevie Mullen the other day, and he was saying that there was targets out there that depended on European progression.
Yeah.
I think that always tends to be the case with Celtic. But if we can get these players in whilst we're still playing these one-off ties, I think it gives us an even better chance of getting to that cash jackpot of the Champions League group stage.
Do you think the Tommy Rogic deal might smooth that over as well?
There was discussion that he could be part of the move, kind of put up as a kind of make weight as part of that deal. I tend to agree with yourself on Tom Rogic. I think after the goal against Aberdeen in the Invincible Cup final, things started to go downhill for Tom Rogic. His injury worries, for me, I think he just doesn't start enough games, and I think himself, looking at his career, looking at the age he's at now, if he can go to a place where he's going to start more games, it's probably more attractive to him than being behind Christie and Cham, McGregor, players like that, and potentially even, and potentially even David Turnbull, who's another player that Celtic are really, really looking at bringing in this summer.
Yeah, it was interesting yesterday actually when Ewan Robertson, I knew Tommy Rogic hadn't played the majority of games, but 17 games last season, 16 the season before.
Yeah.
That's nothing. It's not enough. It's not enough for a first team player.
No, definitely. And if you look at it, when I actually looked at that before Ewan had mentioned it, and I think he only played 22% of Celtic's minutes last season.
Right.
Less than a quarter. And you look at the games, and when he did come on or when he came off, when he started a game, he was certainly less effectual than when he came off the bench. He offered more coming off the bench, splitting up the defences once they get tired. And some of the times that he was on, it felt as if he was kind of running and led. He'd slowed down a bit. and he never really got back up to the level of where he was at in 2017. Now, a lot of people will say he's still the best midfielder at Celtic, and on his day he is, because he can trap the ball, he can find the pass that no one else can find, and he's impossible to get off the ball. But those days of him being at the top of his game are few and far between. And unfortunately, I think we all kind of live on the memories of what he's done for us before, and that kind of shadows over the fact that what Ewan mentioned yesterday, he's only played 33 games in 2 seasons.
Yeah.
I'll always thank Rogic for the memories that he's brought to Celtic, and I wish him all the very best if he does decide to move on.
What I would say on the point of whether or not he's the best midfield player at Celtic, I would suggest that McGregor's got everything in his locker that Rogic's got, but McGregor's got more defensive ability. So I reckon McGregor is a far better and key part of the Celtic team. Again, I love Tommy Rogic. I love what he's achieved. He's always going to be revered as being part of this 9 in a row. It's part of the invincible treble. But it is time for him to go. And if you can push on with that transfer and then reinvest in a position that we definitely need to strengthen with Shane Duffy, it's great business for Celtic, I would suggest. What do the listeners think? Please contact us on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Another reminder, if you're on YouTube, subscribe, because it's free and you can get notifications, etc. We've got a few other interesting comments coming through as well. We've got East End Boy asking, are you guys going to do a phone-in? We need another member of staff before we do that, just to make sure that whoever's phoning in.
I think when Stevie was in the other day, he was calling people callers, so
yes,
maybe we're already ahead of the game there.
Possibly. Now, Gary Doonan confirmed, and I think this was probably prior to you mentioning it, Celtic have over 1,000 employees, full-time and part-time, freebies for them. I think that if Celtic were to go down that road, no one would complain.
No.
And similarly, if it was key workers, no one would complain at that. And it might be deemed as the easy option, but there's no real easy option. I think that's one that no one would have an issue with. So we've spoken about Shane Duffy. Is there any other signing targets, Colin, that has been in the news over the last few days?
Well, obviously I'd mentioned the other day that Celtic have definitely been keeping a very close eye on David Turnbull. I mentioned in the comment section, for anyone that's a regular contributor to A Celtic State of Mind in the live chat on YouTube or on Facebook, you'll have seen that I've mentioned that David Turnbull's been watched every single game this season by Celtic. So I think he will be very high up on the list. But we also see that we've been linked with Caleb Ikibu. I can't even pronounce his name.
Ekuban. Caleb Ekuban.
Ex-Leeds forward, plying his trade in Turkey at the moment. There's a couple of transfers, rumours that have come out of Turkey over the last few weeks. I mean, we were linked with Ollie Burke in one of the Turkish transfer papers, so I wonder where that sort of information's coming from.
A lot of the kind of exports from Turkey are not going too well this week, though, are they, Colin?
No, I think they're better made in China.
So we've got an interesting point coming in from Francie Dub LU. Hopefully that's an El Yunusi reference. And this is coming in via YouTube. Afternoon, gents. The person who pays their regular season tickets are using a bigger percentage of their finances than the business folk. Interesting point.
Could be.
There's people out there, Colin, who make sure they get a season ticket, even if they're unemployed.
And Celtic put the price of the season tickets up by £50 this year, knowing fine well that fans wouldn't be in the stadium for the start of the season. So this extra value that they keep promising for the season ticket holders, it'll be interesting to see if that includes access to these test events.
Someone's talking about a golden ticket. That takes me back to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, right? GMH72 via Twitter. How close you live to Celtic Park should be taken into account to receive a golden ticket. Now, you've got to think about all the people that come over from Ireland, Colin. I travel to Celtic Park, but it's nothing like the commitment required if you're coming over on the early boats from Ireland. So
definitely.
I don't think they'll look at that.
No, I don't think that'll even come into consideration. People can travel. Do you know what I mean? It's not as if travel's restricted, unless you're coming from Aberdeen at the moment. Then anywhere in Scotland, travel's not restricted. So I don't think that will come in under consideration.
Kevin is missing us clearly because he's back on via YouTube saying that I wish I was in the studio so we could have a 2-hour discussion about Be Here Now, which is now a lost classic. Now, it could well be a lost classic. I think Liam Gallagher has often said it's his favourite Oasis album.
It's fantastic for Liam and Noel. I'm delighted for them. And Kevin, you could probably be sitting in this seat and you and Paul could have the 2-hour discussion.
It was the end of an era, Colin, because it was the last Oasis album where every song on it was written by Noel Gallagher.
Now, remind me, is this the one that went head to head with Blur?
No, that was the album before.
Oh, okay.
Where there was 2 singles were released on the same day. See, I'm talking about this because I remember it intimately, whereas it was probably before your time.
So we're talking that it came out 97, this day in 97. So I would have been 3 years old at the time.
All right. I mean, so you didn't queue up for roll with it.
No.
So, Cairn Celtic, welcome back. And you're commenting via Twitter. We know one thing for sure, Paul the Tim will be there. He might be there, he might not be in the stadium.
Well, Paul the Tim's a key worker. So if it goes to key workers, then Paul the Tim is very, very welcome into Celtic Park.
Brilliant. Mikey Posters has confirmed that we've hit 1,000 on YouTube. Brilliant.
Fantastic, Mikey.
Delighted with that.
That's unbelievable.
It's harder than it looks to get past that 1,000. We need to move on to the next target. 5,000, I would suggest.
5,000, 10,000, 100,000.
We'll push it up. Kevin McCluskey, I don't know if you got a chance to listen to Kevin's brilliant insight into Ferencváros yesterday, but we got the exclusive from Kevin because he gave it to us before speaking to the BBC, so good on you, Kevin. If possible, give the tickets to the Kano Foundation and keep with the charitable roots of the club. They'd certainly bring more atmosphere than corporates.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the Kano kids when they come in, they love it. Mm-hmm. They love it. They're there with their yellow high-vis jackets on, their scarves, they're singing away. On some of the times when, definitely during the Ronnie Dyla days when you're kind of going to a game and it was a kind of quieter crowd, you could definitely hear them singing out loud. And the only thing I've got with the Kano Foundation would be how hard is that going to be to try and organise that with schools at the moment?
Yeah.
Obviously schools have only just went back and there's still quite a lot of regulations as for kids sitting together, kids sitting with adults, the distance and that, wearing masks. So that would be hard. I think the more I think on it now, going with the Celtic staff is probably going to be Celtic's easiest option.
Could well be. And again, talking about the Kano, we did interview Erin Boyle. She came onto the podcast. Yeah. I think it was the beginning of the year. Brilliant podcast with Erin. And she was talking about how the kids buzz off the Green Brigade. They're constantly watching the Green Brigade. So that's great as well, isn't it?
It's fantastic. There's a couple of kids that sit just in my row, people from the Greenock Celtics, grandchildren. And we have a supporters group behind us, the boys group.
Yeah.
And every time they start, you can see the kids wanting to join in. This is what it means to be Celtic. When you see the kids...
That's another song reference.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. When you see the kids with the hoops on, their name and a number on the back, it's a new generation of fans that we're bringing in. And if they want to go to the games because of the atmosphere that's created, then that is even better for us.
Well, interesting enough, and just by chance, Red Scotland, welcome back, commenting via YouTube states that the Green Brigade should be the first in. They are the main source of atmosphere year in, year out. Time to repay them. Now, I'm now thinking of the Green Brigade in numbers. Mm-hmm. They would still create some kind of atmosphere, wouldn't they?
Well, I think the Green Brigade, even at that, is still only the official Green Brigade we're talking about here. We're not just talking about the North Curve, because the North Curve holds, I think it's 2,500.
Right.
But the actual Green Brigade themselves in numbers, I think you're only talking maybe 200-300.
Is that right?
So there's still another 600-700 tickets there potentially to go. The standing section, I think, potentially could be the last one to get back in. And it's not anything to do with any previous misdemeanours. I think...
Do you think Celtic would be criticised?
No, I think...
In some areas of the press, if they chose to let the Green Brigade in?
No,
key workers?
I just think if you do the standing section, the standing section has all the connotations of doing the huddle, jumping up and down, being very
more
close proximity, whereas it could be that when you look at the Celtic substitutes at the moment, they've got a specific seat that they need to sit in the stand.
Yeah.
So it could be that one person sat and then 4 seats away is the next one to sit in. And I don't quite think you could do that within the standing section.
No, that's a great point, Colin. Francie WLU, welcome back, commenting via YouTube, where we have more than 1,000 subscribers, all free of charge. Hope young Davy Turnbull finds his way to paradise. Terrific young player whose worth will grow over the years. Cheers, Tom. All the best wherever you end up. Everybody wishes Tom Rogic all the very best. But Gary Doonan comes back to suggest or ask, where would he fit in? And we did ask that just the other day, Colin. Where would Turnbull fit in this Celtic side? We're already talking about Ncham, pushing for a first team jersey. Yep. Where does Turnbull come into that equation?
See, for me, Turnbull's more of an attacking option. And when you look at the goals that he scored in his debut season at Motherwell, they were all shots from either the edge of the area or outside the box. Quite a few penalties in there as well. He was that sort of playing off the striker role, where I think Celtic lack at the moment. And I tried to suggest playing Elyounoussi in there. And I think we've seen glimpses of it on Wednesday night against KR Reykjavik, where Elyounoussi moved inside and left that space on the wing for the likes of Taylor to put the ball over. I think with Turnbull, it's that kind of player that you're missing when you're going to a Kilmarnock away. When the pitch is narrow and you're looking for someone to hit some shots from the edge of the area, to find the pass that opens up the defence, I think Turnbull's that kind of player. Similarly, Ryan Christie's that kind of player as well. But I think David Turnbull at 21 has certainly got the ability to go above and beyond the ability of Ryan Christie right now. And I think it's
a bold statement.
I honestly do. I think Ryan Christie gets a lot of credit for his turnaround in his career at Celtic. But you've got to remember, maybe 2 years ago, we were ready to let him go.
Yeah, I've mentioned that, when he was at Aberdeen, it was almost a foregone conclusion that he would sign for Aberdeen and he'd be on his way. And he himself turned it round. He took the opportunity against Hearts that day, and I'd say he's never looked back. There's been ups and downs for him, but I think in relation to his turnaround, a lot of that was down to the boy himself, the conditioning. He came back stronger, didn't he?
Yeah.
More physical.
He drifts in and out of form as well. I think he gets a lot of credit because he's a player that never stops running. He's like the Duracell bunny. He keeps going. He never gives up. And whether he contributes a lot to the game or he doesn't, he's always one that's running about the park. And he's always looking to get involved. You've seen it actually last season when he gets sent off at Livingston. He couldn't get himself into the game, and when he did get himself into the game, he was too over enthusiastic and ended up following through and getting sent off. So having someone like Turnbull pushing Christie, it means we've also got another option to move Christie out wide as well. I think he's definitely got a place within the first team.
Just a wee point on that particular challenge at Livingston. At the time, I was working with someone who was best friends with Christie's girlfriend, fiance, and it just shows you how impactful social media can be, because that put Ryan Christie on such a downer. The impact of what he did, the defeat, and then what happened on social media that night, came off social media and fell into a deep depression for a period of time. So it just shows you. There's been mentions of horses on the show today.
Really?
And somebody wants to know what's going on with this penguin on your t-shirt.
It's a penguin. It's a design. I picked it up
a John
actually.
T. Little penguin there, Colin.
I picked it up in Livingston Designer Outlet last weekend.
A lot of
when I was
mentions
there.
about Livingston, so let's talk about Livingston. Let's talk about Anthony Stokes going to Livingston. Stokes' name comes up all the time because I make parallels between him and Lee Griffiths.
Yep.
Not in terms of style or ability, but the way that Stokes' career has gone. It's fallen off the edge of a cliff.
Yep.
Ever since he left Hibs, right? And he left Hibs due to a falling out with Neil Lennon over in Portugal. He didn't obey to the curfew rules, and he left the club as a result of it. And I think he is a warning sign to Lee Griffiths, who turned 30 yesterday. Stokes is a warning sign to Lee Griffiths. He could have the next 2 years, he'd been a Celtic player scoring goals and playing games, or he could go down the route of Stokesy, who's now just been linked on the back of the Lyndon Dykes transfer to Livingston. Do you think that's a good move for all all involved. I mean, for me, Stokes would probably be a better option than London Dykes.
Do you know what I find very interesting though? Because of Stokes' history in his past, previously the last Scottish club that were linked to him was East Kilbride. So he's went from the Lowland League to being linked to a team in the Scottish Premier League.
Yeah.
And it just shows that people do have faith in his ability.
Yes.
But the fact that he basically had to go to Iraq and Iran, whichever league it was, to get himself a professional club, shows that there's a player in there, but who can really trust him?
It does come down to that. I mean, Neil Lennon, I think, is a great man manager. I think he's proved that since he's come back to Celtic. And I think he's managed Lee Griffiths particularly well. There was that moment where he came out and very publicly had a go at him. But maybe there was method to the madness there. Maybe that was something that spurred on Lee to get fitter. It might have been the kick up the backside that Lee Griffiths needed. It might have been part of this man management that I'm talking about. It got to the point with Stokes where he just wanted him out of the club. He was too much of a bad influence and he got him out of Hibs. I'm talking about Hibs. Because obviously, you know, he had been given, I think he'd had 3 spells at Hibs, 1 loan spell, 2 permanent spells. And since then, his career has been on a downward spiral. Are Livingston the right club for him, Colin?
I think it's an interesting one. Gary Holt is a young up-and-coming manager who I think has a specific style of football. You've seen it there if anyone watched the Livingston game at the weekend. It was still the idea of
anti-football,
putting the ball up to the big striker. And as much as he'll come out and say that the substitution was enforced by injury, I think he was already looking at taking off the striker that he brought on in the second half because he just wasn't as good as Jack Hamilton was in the first half. Jack Hamilton was actually causing Philip Hollander quite a bit of trouble. And when he brought on the boy Salim as the boy from Queen's Park from last season, as slow as he was getting about the park, because of his physicality, it caused Rangers quite a few problems. He won a couple of free kicks, but Livingston's best chance was a shot from their own half.
Yeah,
that nearly went over the goalkeeper. That was their only shot on target. So,
but it's anti-football, and sometimes when you're operating on a budget like Gary Holt has, and by the way, that £2 million transfer is great business for Livingston and for Queen of the South as it happens. But sometimes it's your only option.
So where does Stokes fit into that style of football then?
Well, you're right. I mean, Gary Doonan again prolifically comment on today's show. Thank you for that, Gary. Describes Stokes as a great player, a technical ability, goal scorer, clever, and that he'll do well at Livvy. I think he's a type of player that, because of the way he plays, even with this they can't hoof the ball up the front if Stokes is your front man.
No, but when you look at Livingston when they were coming through the divisions, when they had guys like Graham Dorrans, Lee Griffiths was at the team.
Remember the team? I don't know if you watched the podcast we did with Joe Hamill. Joe Hamill was a professional at Hearts. He went down to Livingston, and he had quite a lengthy spell with Livingston. He went down to Leicester with Craig Levine, and he comes back up the road and he spends a few years at Livvy. And the team he was in was some of the names you've mentioned, as well as Snodgrass and Lee Griffiths.
Yep.
Some of the young guys coming through were the likes of McNulty, Scougall, Donaldson. So they've had a great crop of players over the piece. But at the moment, I think when you look at Livvy, you think that they are the anti-football team of the Premier League.
When you look at the kind of strikers that they've had up there over the last couple of seasons, Dykes, Dolly Menga, who they released today, players like that, it's always been lump the ball up, hope for the second ball, try and get that kind of bit of luck.
Just nullify your opponents.
Yeah, and when Celtic have travelled there, they've always struggled to break them down. And it's nothing to do with a narrow park or the plastic park. It's just the way that Livingston have sort of threw themselves at every single ball. When you look at Celtic's second goal, when we drew 2 each there, just before the outbreak happened, Celtic actually had to try and break down 7 or 8 players within that box.
Yeah.
And it even took a deflection for Rogic's shot to end up in the back of the net. So it's always traditionally a hard place to go to when Celtic or Rangers come to town. But when you look at the results against other teams in the league, you can see why they would struggle. I think they're now 14 or 15 games away from home without a win. So it just shows you that the style of football they've got just suits the surface that they play on.
Again, the comments are coming in thick and fast. There's a Celtic Da comment coming in from Kez de Val. Get the Celtic Das in. They deserve some reward for their unconditional support in the 90s. The strange thing about that comment is that comment could be a genuine Celtic Da comment, or it could be
it's sarcastic.
an anti-Da comment.
Sarcastic, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Remember
but there's
the
a lot
90s?
of talk of the 90s, eh?
Remember
There's a
the
lot
90s?
of talk of the 90s, but it's not because it's Celtic today. It's all about Oasis, isn't it? So Red Scotland comments via YouTube between El Yunusi, Christie, Jamesy and incoming Turnbull. It gives Celtic lots of interchangeable capacity across the advanced midfield. Sign Turnbull.
Yep. And then you've got to add Mickey Johnson onto that as well.
Yeah.
We're hoping that he's only about 3 or 5 weeks away from returning to fitness. And the build that Mikey Johnson has had from coaches, from players that he's played with, the glimpses that we've seen of him suggest that he is a fantastic player and one to be excited about, as well as Karamoko Dembele as well. So there's quite a few options.
Is Dembele ready? When you look at the fact he wasn't obviously on the bench during the week, we've not used him a great deal, still only 17. We're still looking at players that can play, in that area of the field, Colin. Do you think he's ready, or is it a case of the fact that you want to keep him happy? Yeah. He's still hot property. You want to get him some game time, because if you're in that development squad, you're not playing. You're barely playing football.
There's no games.
We've spoken about that. So Dembele, is he ready to make an impact in this season?
Well, I'd actually heard last week that he'd put a transfer request in.
Did he?
He's into the last year of his deal at Celtic, and he wants to be playing first team football. Now, I feel it would be the wrong move for him to move away. All we have to do is to look at guys like Islam Feruz, Charlie Masonda, players of that kind of ilk who have been very highly thought of, Calvin Miller, and just the careers didn't pan out for them. I think at Celtic his development will be monitored and it will be helped in the best way possible, and he'll get the game time that he needs. The only thing that would go against what I'm saying is if you take a look at the progression of Billy Gilmore at Chelsea.
Yeah.
He certainly went down there and made a big impact. Will Karamoko make that same impact? Who knows? But I think we will probably see a lot more of him as the season progresses, especially when we're playing 3 games a week, basically from now till I think it's the end of February.
That's the two ends of the scale, Colin. You've got Islam Feruz, who's without a club and unlikely ever to get back into the senior game.
I think he's playing Sunday League football now.
He's playing with his mates, basically.
Yeah.
Or on the other end of that scale, you've got a guy in young Billy Gilmore who, what a prospect he is, and his development has been rapid. When you look at that, so that is the two ends of the scale, but that's the risk that you take if you jump the gun, if you like, and you go down south at this stage at 17 years of age. So I think that it's one of these ones. I feel that is it time for him to. I don't think we can loan him out. I don't think you can do that, because you're still nurturing him at this age, and you want him to be nurtured around a philosophy of football. If you loan somebody out, they're learning a different philosophy often.
Well, you take a look at Ewan Henderson last season when he moved out to Ross County on loan. He barely got any game time.
Wait a minute, I need to interrupt this. One of the comment. Again, this is the second time this has happened. Someone's accusing me of drinking shandy live on air. Stephen T. It is old Jamaican ginger beer, non-alcoholic.
And if Old Jamaica would like to sponsor us, please reach out to pauljohndykes@gmail.com.
Yeah, it's ginger beer and water. That's what we're on the day. It's all the soft stuff. Gary Doonan, a wee point on Dembele, still 3 years younger than when McGregor made his debut. Christie signed at 21, never became a pick until 23. It's too soon for him to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think someone really has to reach out to him and say, look, there's still another 15, 16 years left in your career here. You're only 17. Obviously, the problem that he's had is he's been blown up massively since he was about 13 or 14. Sponsorship deals with Nike, been on all these kind of kids to watch list and things like that.
Yep.
All the YouTube compilations of him that's been put together. He's got friends that on social media from the likes of Antoine Griezmann, Neymar, players like that who through his sponsorship deals have become known to him. So he's got the world at his feet, this boy.
We've seen it all before as well, though, Colin. You know, Mikey Posters makes a good point. Is Dembele a classic case of agents in his ear? We had John Calhoun in here 3-4 weeks back, and obviously John was involved with Islam Farouz, and he did say to us that, you know, the minute the other agent got involved, that's when Islam Farouz's head was turned. So you have got an agent in a player's ear as well.
It's so easy. I mean, you had this long discussion yesterday about Kieran Tierney. Mm-hmm. Now, Kieran Tierney was offered the world at Arsenal, and it worked for him, but we could have been sitting here talking about a guy that was not making the bench for Arsenal. Do you know what I mean? You've got that, there's the chance it goes well and the chance it doesn't go well. And it's up to that player to make the decision on it. And Karamoko will make the decision that he thinks is best for him. Whether we agree with it or not, there's nothing that we can do to influence it, apart from actually maybe giving him a bit more game time at Celtic.
And in this season of seasons, it's not going to be likely, I don't think, but we will see how that one develops. Now, in the news this week, just yesterday, Henrik Larsson has returned to Barcelona. Now, if you do listen to A Celtic State of Mind, I've been banging on about finding a job for Henrik Larsson. I was criticised because people asked, you know, surely it's down to the ability, the coaching ability, before the profile or the attachment to the club, which is fair comment. But I did think that, particularly around the Damien Duff departure, that we could have looked at maybe Larsson in relation to a striker coach.
Yep.
And I did mention that he's got a great job there, isn't he?
Oh, fantastic.
Should he have been approached to come back to Celtic would be my question.
Well, what I find interesting is he's went from potentially being the assistant manager at Southend, or the manager at Southend, to now being the assistant manager at Barcelona, one of the biggest clubs in the world, and under the tutelage of Ronald Koeman as well, who I'm sure he will pick up masses of knowledge and information from. Whether it will be enough to keep his former teammate Lionel Messi at the club is something that will be an interesting thing. Obviously, the two of them played together when Larsson moved out to Barcelona on his. I think he was there for 2 years, 2 or 3 seasons. But he's well received in the city of Barcelona. Even when I've been now to Barcelona 2 or 3 times. When you look in Barcelona shops, there's still pictures of Henrik Larsson in there. It just shows you how good the man actually was, that even in the short period that he was there in Catalonia, he's still revered as one of the greats.
It's an interesting management lineup as well, Koeman and Larsson, isn't it?
It isn't. Do you know, it's a bold move from Henrik, because he has the managerial experience himself. He is a manager, and he's now went back to being an assistant. So some people would see that as a downturn in a career movement, but to move to be the assistant manager of Barcelona is incredible. I think you're right, but there was a place for him at Celtic Park, especially under Neil Lennon, as a striking coach. When we look at guys like Patrick Klimala coming through, Albion Ajeti, Edward.
Well, my big argument was that we're not producing them ourselves. That was always my big argument about strikers, and I know that Sean Maloney has been mentioned in dispatches, but you know, if you go right back to Charlie Nicholas in the early 80s, prolific goal-scoring striker produced by Celtic. Jerry Craney, don't laugh at the back, Jerry Craney, prolific goal-scorer produced by Celtic in the 1990s. He was sold maybe a wee bit too soon. Since then, who've had, and I know obviously Maloney was mentioned, and yeah, absolutely, but since then, I mean, it's one in a generation we produce a striker.
Yeah, you look at my era, and I'll class my era from sort of 99 onwards. You're looking at guys like Mark Burchill, Craig Beattie, I'm trying to think who else would have even come through, Tony Watt, but these were guys, most of them, with the exception of, I think Mark came through, but Craig Beattie signed from Rangers, Tony Watt signed from Airdrie. A lot of the guys that kind of do make that step up come from other clubs, and it's not players that we've brought through since they were 10, 11, 12, the way that we have with Callum McGregor, with James Forrest, with Kieran Tierney. It's guys that we've brought in because we know it's a position that we lack in.
No, you're right about Tony Watt, and although the transfer came from Airdrie, Tony had obviously had his development at the precursor to the Jimmy Johnson Academy at Clyde Soccer, so he had been one of the players there. And we've got a couple of games coming up. It's the weekend and also one next week. We spoke all about Ferencváros to Kevin McCluskey, who's got a great insight, being based over in Budapest. And he talks to us all the time on the WhatsApp group about Hungarian football and sends us links to watch live games. Can't say I've taken him up on that yet. So what's your feelings about next week? It's at Celtic Park.
Yep.
They're going to be, I think, a higher standard of team than the team who just beat 6-0, right?
Yep.
Reykjavik. Are you going in quite confident after that swashbuckling performance on Tuesday night?
I think that with more games under the belt, then certainly we should be going in pretty fit. Despite the fact that we hadn't played a game in about 10 days, 11 days, we actually looked raring to go from kick-off on Wednesday night. Now, it's easy to say that the opposition in front of us wasn't of the best standard, but you can only beat what's in front of you. So, to put in a performance like that and probably not even get out of second gear was pretty impressive. I think we will have to make a step up on Wednesday night when we play Ferencváros. They are the Hungarian champions, and from what Kevin was telling us, the boy that scored the first goal, I'm not sure if he got both of the goals, is definitely the best player in that league.
Yeah.
So I'm sure Celtic will have sat and watched that and pinpointed the players that they have to keep an eye on, and also the way to goal. They looked at the defence, where they were shaky, and where they can exploit things like that. But for these players coming even to an empty Celtic Park, playing in an arena of that size and stature, that will take a while for them to settle in. So if Celtic can come out the traps flying the same way they did on Wednesday night, then I'd like to think that we could maybe end up with a kind of comfortable result.
We'll be covering that game and all games throughout the season. If you want to sponsor one of our match days, you can contact us, and you will have your advertising boards above the screens, as JBMs have done today, and also all your details will be running along the bottom. You will also get the opportunity to come and join the panel should you wish to do that. So please get in touch if you want to sponsor any of the match days. Dundee United tomorrow, that's a different game entirely. It's at Tannadice. We've not been there for a few years, Colin.
First visit since January 2016. I think I was actually at that game. I do remember it. Griffiths got a double. Joseph Siminovic scored, and then I'm pretty sure that's the one where Chris Commons scored the bicycle kick.
Yes.
So first time being there, and coming up now for 4 years, 4.5 years. It's a fantastic venue, Tannadice. I love going through there. It's one of the grounds where Celtic get quite a lot of tickets for it. I think they take up sort of 2.5 stands. And it's always a great game. Dundee United look to have started the season fairly well. I think they're still missing the firepower that Lawrence Shanklin gives them, but he's sort of got a wee bit of a niggling injury, so it'll be interesting to see whether they start him. He's not made the last 2 games, so it'd be just throwing him in from the cold for this.
Coming in from the cold.
Yes. So, but the point that's been made by pundits across Scotland is that where Dundee United struggle is their centre-backs.
Right.
So if we can get at their centre-backs early, then hopefully we can get a couple of goals, get that away victory on the record for Celtic, and start this run that we really need to go on over the next few months and really not drop any more points.
Well, I'll speak to you before the Ferencváros game, so give me a prediction for Dundee United tomorrow.
I'll go with Celtic to win 3-1.
Goal scored by?
First goal scorer, I'll go for Odsonne Edouard.
Perfect. Is there anything else you want to cover, Colin? Any shout-outs that you want to make before we close up for today?
Probably 2 things. We're not going to go into a political podcast, but I don't know if you've seen that Joe Biden has made his special code name Celtic.
Well,
an interesting one, ahead of the political debacle over in America. As they go in for the parliamentary elections. Question for the listeners that's out there, who would be Rangers? So that's one. And also a big shout out to Glasgow City ladies. They are in the quarter final of the Champions League tonight. A special one-off tie against Wolfsburg. 5 p.m, I believe it's on the BBC. So if you're struggling for a football fix, then give the Glasgow ladies a bit of your support. Paul, any more questions coming in?
No, we've got loads and loads of interaction and engagement from our viewers and listeners on YouTube, Twitter and Facebook. So please continue to get involved and subscribe to us on YouTube. As I say, it's free of charge. We're over 1,000. We're going for 5,000 next. If you want to sponsor us, get in touch. But all that's left for me to say is, Colin Watt, thank you for joining me on a